Welcome to True Echo, where the stories you hear are more than entertainment, they're reflections of dignity, justice, and the moments when ordinary people stand tall against impossible odds. What you're about to witness isn't just a story, it's a battle between arrogance and resilience, wealth and truth. And at the center of it all is a young woman who refused to let her dreams be crushed by power or pride. The Grand Astoria ballroom glittered like a golden palace that night. Chandeliers sparkled above, casting rainbows across marble floors polished to perfection. Waiters in stiff uniforms glided like shadows, carrying trays stacked with champagne flutes that shimmered beneath the crystal lights. Wealth clung to every corner of the room, the gowns, the diamonds, the tuxedos pressed sharper than glass. To the guests, this was another evening of charity masked in glamour. To Cassandra Riley, it was survival. Cassie weaved between tables with the grace of someone used to being unseen. She balanced her tray effortlessly, placing glasses down with mechanical precision. To the outside eye, she was a simple waitress, another cog in the endless wheel of service workers that kept New York's elite entertained. But beneath her calm exterior, Cassie carried the weight of broken dreams. Only that morning, she had received another rejection letter from the Donovan Academy Alumni Grant Committee, the third in a month. Once, she had been one of Donovan's brightest dancers, a rising star destined for Broadway. Then life had ripped the stage from under her feet, replacing pointe shoes with rubber-soled work shoes. She didn't have time to indulge in despair, not here, not tonight. The gala was for St. Jude's Children's Foundation, and like all charity events in Manhattan, it was less about helping children and more about the wealthy patting themselves on the back. Cassie had worked dozens of these, each one a performance of its own, polite smiles, silent patience, invisible endurance. She thought she knew how to disappear. Until she felt his eyes. Preston Montgomery III sat at table 14, lounging like a king on a throne he hadn't earned. Everything about him screamed generational wealth, the perfectly tailored suit, the Rolex gleaming beneath the lights, the practiced smirk of someone who had never heard no in his life. His fiancée Veronica sparkled beside him, her crimson smile sharp enough to cut glass, while his companions, Chad and Bryce, laughed like hyenas at every word he uttered. When Cassie poured his water, Preston pointed at the tiniest drop on the cloth and smirked. "Sloppy," he said loud enough for others to hear. It wasn't about water, it was about power. His entourage chuckled on cue. Cassie steadied her breath. Mrs. Peterson's warning replayed in her mind, "Don't engage. These people can smell fear." She apologized, her tone even, but Preston wasn't done. He leaned back in his chair, eyes gleaming with cruelty. "I'll make this interesting," he declared, standing just as the band struck a tango rhythm. "I dare you, yes, you, to dance with me. Right here, right now." Gasps swept across nearby tables. Veronica's lips curved in wicked amusement. Then came the dagger. Preston fanned out a stack of $100 bills. $10,000 if you can last the song without embarrassing yourself. If you stumble, if you fall, you're fired. The ballroom froze. It wasn't a challenge, it was a trap. Everyone expected Cassie to decline. Everyone but Cassie herself. Her heart thundered. $10,000 was a lifeline, 2 years of her mother's medications. But beyond the money was the smirk in his eyes, the same smirk she had seen on every rejection letter, every wealthy hand that dismissed her. She had spent years swallowing indignities. This one she couldn't swallow. Slowly, she placed her tray down, removed her apron, and kicked off her shoes. The murmur spread like fire. Nate Crow, a freelance photographer hired for the evening, snapped his camera up. His lens caught the subtle transformation, the apron folded, the shoes discarded, the quiet defiance in her stance. The crowd leaned in. Preston offered his hand with mock chivalry, but Cassie ignored it, walking barefoot onto the carpeted floor. The music swelled. She closed her eyes. For a second, she wasn't in the ballroom, she was back on stage, the ghost of the spotlight warming her skin. When she opened them, fire burned in her gaze. "Ready when you are," she said. Preston grinned, gripping her too tightly. He launched into stiff, textbook steps. For the first 2 counts, she followed, pliant and obedient. Then on the 3rd step, she took control. Her movements sharpened, her body becoming the music itself. She spun with precision, catching Preston off guard. His smirk faltered. She wasn't just following, she was leading. The crowd leaned forward. Champagne glasses stilled midair. Nate's camera clicked in rapid succession, capturing the raw electricity sparking between humiliation and triumph. Cassie hooked her leg in a flawless gancho, flipping the power dynamic. Preston stumbled. The audience gasped. The arrogant heir was no longer leading the dance, he was struggling to keep up. Cassie transformed. She wasn't Cassie the waitress anymore. She was Cassandra Riley, prodigy of Donovan Academy. Every step carried rage, grief, and brilliance. Every spin was a reclamation of her stolen dream. Preston sweated, jerky and clumsy, while she glided circles around him. And when the final note struck, she spun away, chest heaving, chin high. Preston stood alone, red-faced, humiliated before his peers. For a heartbeat, silence gripped the room. Then applause exploded. It wasn't polite clapping, it was a thunderous ovation. People rose to their feet. Strangers shouted bravo. Cassie soaked it in, trembling, alive. For the first time in years, she felt like a dancer again. Preston's face twisted in rage. He ripped the money from his clip and flung it at her feet like trash. "There's your tip," he spat. The bills fluttered like confetti. Gasps rippled across the crowd. He had reduced her art to currency, trying to reassert control. Cassie looked at the money. $10,000. Enough to change her life. Enough to ease her mother's suffering. Her chest tightened. But then her gaze lifted to Preston's sneer, the embodiment of everything she despised. Her choice crystallized. "I didn't dance for your money," she said, her voice cutting the silence. "I danced for me. My art is not for sale." She turned, left the bills untouched, and walked barefoot across the carpet, her head high. The applause roared again, deafening. Preston was left trembling in fury. Nate captured the final shot, Cassie's back as she walked away, the money scattered at her feet, the air undone behind her. What no one knew yet was that this moment would not end in the ballroom. It was only the beginning. The applause that rattled the crystal chandeliers still rang in Cassie's ears as she pushed through the service door into the back corridors of the hotel. The roar of the ballroom was replaced by the hiss of steam from the kitchen and the clatter of dishes stacked into plastic bins. For a second, she leaned against the wall, her bare feet pressed to cold tile, her folded apron clutched to her chest. She had quit. The words Mrs. Peterson had tried to form, half reprimand, half admiration, still hung in the air. Cassie knew what she'd done wasn't just reckless. It was career suicide. She had walked out on a high-paying shift, humiliated one of the most powerful men in New York, and turned herself into a spectacle. Tomorrow, when the glittering elite woke up, she would still be in Queens with overdue bills. But for those 3 minutes, she had been more than that. She had been herself. In the ballroom, Preston Montgomery III stood frozen, seething as whispers slithered through the crowd. His fiancée Veronica finally touched his arm, though her expression betrayed nothing but disdain. She leaned close, her words like ice. "You just got outdanced by the help, Preston. In front of everyone." Her lips curled in a cruel smile. "I'll make sure brunch tomorrow is lively." He shoved her hand away. The laughter, the whispers, the pitying glances cut deeper than any insult. His name meant control, control over businesses, people, reputations. And yet, in front of Manhattan's most powerful families, he had lost control to a barefoot waitress. His humiliation was immortal now, stamped into memory by every gawking witness and every camera flash. Not far away, Nate Crow reviewed the shots on his camera, adrenaline pumping in his veins. He wasn't just holding photographs, he was holding dynamite. He'd worked hundreds of society events, capturing fake smiles and shallow gestures, but tonight he had something rare: truth. Pure, dramatic, undeniable truth. His favorite frame was Cassie standing tall in her socks, Preston sweating beside her, the roles inverted. Another was the final shot of her walking away, the bills scattered like ash at her feet. These weren't just pictures. They were a story, David and Goliath retold in designer tuxedos. Nate knew at the moment he saw the images. This would go viral. Back in Queens, hours later, Cassie sat on her sagging mattress, staring at her cracked phone screen. Her mother was asleep in the next room, her soft snores drifting through the thin walls. Cassie's body ached from 16 hours on her feet and 3 minutes of burning resurrection. She couldn't decide if she felt liberated or doomed. She replayed every second of the tango. The sweat on Preston's brow. The shocked faces in the crowd. The heat of the ovation. And then, the bills at her feet. She had walked away from $10,000. Her practical brain screamed at her even now, "You idiot. That could have saved you. That could have saved her." But her heart whispered something different: you didn't dance for him. You danced for yourself. The knock on her door jolted her. Midnight in Queens wasn't the time for visitors. She hesitated, peering through the peephole. It was her neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, clutching a phone. "Cassie," she whispered urgently through the door. "You're on the internet." Cassie blinked, confused, then opened the door. Mrs. Alvarez shoved the phone at her. On the glowing screen was BuzzFeed News, plastered with a headline. "Millionaire heir dares waitress to dance for $10,000, she wipes the floor with him and walks away from the cash." Cassie's stomach flipped. Beneath the headline was Nate's photo, her in mid-spin, hair flying, fire in her eyes. The caption read, "Cassandra Riley, former dancer turned waitress, outshines Montgomery heir in shocking ballroom tango." Her knees nearly buckled. She sank onto the couch as Mrs. Alvarez hovered excitedly. "Mija, look at the comments, everyone loves you." Cassie scrolled. Thousands of shares. Tens of thousands of likes. Comment after comment praising her: "She's a queen. This is art. Preston Montgomery is finished. Somebody put her on Broadway already." She covered her mouth with her hand. The ovation had followed her out of the ballroom and into the world. But with it came something else: exposure. People were already digging into her identity, her past. Her anonymity had evaporated overnight. Meanwhile, across Manhattan, Preston Montgomery Jr. was reading the same article in his penthouse office overlooking Central Park. Unlike his son, he didn't waste his nights on cheap champagne and empty dares. He was cold, strategic, the mind behind Montgomery Corp's billion-dollar empire. And as he read, fury smoldered. The stock had already dipped on pre-market whispers. Investors were calling. St. Jude's Foundation was reviewing its association. His son's antics had turned the Montgomery name toxic. And worst of all, the story wasn't about Cassie alone, it was about them. About power, arrogance, and cruelty. Preston Jr. slammed the newspaper onto his desk. "You've disgraced this family," he spat when his son slunk in hours later, pale and shaken. "You let a nobody waitress humiliate you. And now, you've cost us millions." Preston III mumbled, "She embarrassed me, Dad. I'll fix it." "No," his father snapped, his voice cold as steel. "You'll do nothing. You are finished publicly. Your only job now is silence. I'll handle the damage." But silence couldn't stop what was coming. By dawn, Cassie's face was everywhere. #Gala dancer trended worldwide. Strangers flooded her inbox with support. A stranger started a GoFundMe titled "Tip Jar for the Gala Dancer." It surpassed $50,000 before lunch. Her phone buzzed non-stop, friends she hadn't heard from in years, reporters begging for interviews, talent scouts sniffing opportunity. And then came the knock on her door. Not Mrs. Alvarez this time. A woman in a tailored suit, sharp and professional. "Cassandra Riley?" the woman asked. "My name is Monica Vance. I work for Gregory Bishop." Cassie's blood froze. Gregory Bishop. The Gregory Bishop, Broadway's most legendary director, a man whose shows had defined generations. Monica handed her a cream-colored card embossed with an address. "Mr. Bishop was at the gala last night. He was impressed. He'd like to meet you tomorrow morning at his studio." Cassie clutched the card like it was a relic. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'll be there." As Monica walked away, Cassie closed the door and pressed her back against it, trembling. She had no idea that Gregory Bishop's invitation was more than opportunity. It was fate, a twist that would unearth old wounds and ignite a war with the Montgomery family that no one could have predicted. Because if Bishop wanted her for more than a dance, then Cassie would be stepping onto a stage not just to reclaim her dream, but to expose the Montgomerys in ways they could never contain. The next morning, the city felt different. The air outside her Queens apartment buzzed with the constant hum of traffic, but to Cassie, every honk and shout seemed sharper, more purposeful. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes, the glint of chandeliers, the stunned faces, the fluttering bills at her feet. And then the headline: she walked away from $10,000. She dressed in the best she could manage, a pair of clean jeans and a gray sweater that was beginning to thin at the cuffs. She hated how ordinary she looked, but her wardrobe had long reflected her paycheck, not her dreams. She tied her hair back neatly, grabbed her bag, and slipped the card Monica had given her into her pocket. Gregory Bishop's studio was everything she remembered from her academy days and everything she had missed. High ceilings with steel beams. Wooden floors scarred with decades of sweat. A wall of mirrors that reflected not just bodies, but ambitions. Even the air smelled of rosin and floor polish, a scent she hadn't realized she craved until it hit her like a wave. Gregory Bishop himself sat on a stool in the center of the room, his silver hair wild, his blue eyes sharp, his frame wiry like a coiled spring. He didn't waste words on small talk. He simply gestured to the vast empty floor. "The other night," he rasped, "you danced Astor Piazzolla's Libertango. A difficult piece. You didn't just dance it, you inhabited it." Cassie swallowed hard. Her instinct was to deflect, to downplay herself. But Bishop wasn't a man you lied to. "I knew the piece," she admitted. "I had choreographed it once. Years ago." "I saw training," Bishop said, his eyes narrowing. "Clean lines, discipline, but tempered with raw emotion. The Donovan Academy. Am I wrong?" Her breath caught. Few people recognize Donovan technique so easily. "No," she whispered. "I studied there. I didn't graduate." "I know," Bishop said simply. "I checked. Cassandra Riley. Top of your class for 3 years. Winner of the 2021 Choreography Prize. And then, you vanished." He circled her slowly, like a hawk appraising prey. "The record says you withdrew for personal reasons. I want the real ones." Cassie's throat tightened. For years, she had avoided this question with half-truths. But Bishop's eyes pinned her in place. His intensity demanded honesty. "My father," she began, her voice trembling. "He ran a small construction supply business in Brooklyn. It was our family's livelihood. He got a major contract for a waterfront development. Biggest deal of his life. He hired staff, bought materials, took out loans. And then, halfway through the project, the developer pulled out. Claimed zoning issues, a loophole in the contract. But it wasn't true. They found a cheaper supplier overseas. She paused, the words catching in her throat. He lost everything. The stress triggered a heart attack. He survived, but he was never the same. The medical bills were crushing. I had tuition covered at Donovan, but not rent, not caregiving costs. So I left. I waited tables. Anything to pay bills. Silence swallowed the studio. Bishop's expression softened, though his eyes still burned. The developer, he asked quietly. Who were they? Cassie hesitated. For years she had avoided attaching a name, because saying it aloud felt like giving it power. But now, in this room, she owed him the truth. Montgomery Corp., she said finally. Bishop froze. The name hung in the air like poison. His jaw clenched. Montgomery Corp., he repeated, almost to himself. The very family whose heir you humiliated in front of half of New York. Cassie nodded, her stomach twisting. I didn't know who he was at first. Not until I saw his full name in the articles this morning. Preston Montgomery III. The same dynasty that destroyed my father. The irony was suffocating. The same family that had ripped away her future had, through arrogance and cruelty, opened the door to it again. Fate wasn't poetic. Fate was vicious. Bishop rubbed his temple, pacing. My God, he muttered. The universe has a cruel sense of humor. His eyes snapped back to her, not just with interest, but with something like awe. Do you realize what this means? Your story isn't just a viral headline. It's an epic. A prodigy crushed by corporate greed rises from obscurity to humiliate the very family that destroyed her. It's Shakespearean. Cassie wanted to shrink from the enormity of it. I'm not. I haven't danced seriously in 4 years. I'm out of shape. I don't know if Muscle has memory, Bishop interrupted. And soul has it too. What I saw that night wasn't just technique. It was fire. You can't teach that. You can't fake that. That's what I've been searching for. Her brow furrowed. Searching for? I'm developing a new show, Bishop said, his voice commanding again. It's called Echoes. It's about ghosts of the past and the fight to reclaim your voice. I've auditioned over 300 dancers from New York to Paris. None of them were right. And then I saw you. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. I don't want to audition you, Cassandra. I want to cast you. The lead role. Broadway. The room tilted. Her legs nearly gave out. Broadway. The word echoed like a prayer she had long buried. For years, she had lived paycheck to paycheck, trading her dream for survival. And now, here it was, being placed before her again. Tears welled in her eyes. You really think I can do this? She whispered. I know you can, Bishop said firmly. But the question is, do you want it? Because if you take this, it won't just be a show. It will be war. The Montgomerys will see your face on posters, your name in lights. Every night you take the stage, you will be their shame. They won't forgive it. They will fight you. So I ask again, do you want it? The weight of the choice pressed on her chest. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about her family, about every small business Montgomery Corp had crushed, about every dismissal, every humiliation. She straightened her back, the fire from the ballroom returning to her veins. Yes, she said, steady and sure. I want it. Bishop smiled, the kind of smile that appeared rarely on his hardened face. Good. Then your new life begins Monday, 6 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. Cassie left the studio that morning walking through Manhattan like the city belonged to her. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like a dead end. It felt like a stage. But she didn't know yet how much darker things would get before the curtain rose. Because while she was stepping into light, the Montgomery family was already gathering in the shadows, planning to strike back. The first rays of dawn filtered weakly through the soot-streaked windows of Gregory Bishop's studio as Cassie stretched at the bar. Every muscle screamed in protest. Her legs trembled, her back burned, and her feet, bare and battered from years of neglect, throbbed in agony. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Bishop watched her like a hawk, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Again, he barked, as she stumbled through a sequence of pirouettes. Your spine is your anchor. Stop fighting the music. Let it carry you. She bit back a gasp of pain, lifted her chin, and tried again. This wasn't the Donovan Academy, where mistakes were softened by encouragement. This was Bishop's domain, where every error was a sin against art. Yet beneath his harshness, Cassie caught flickers of something else, belief. He pushed her not because he doubted her, but because he knew she had more to give. By noon, she collapsed onto the wooden floor, drenched in sweat. Her body felt broken, but inside, a spark glowed brighter than it had in years. Bishop crouched beside her, his voice softer than before. The stage is cruel, Cassandra. It demands everything, blood, sweat, soul. You've already given more to life than most dancers ever will. Now you must give it to your art. Do you understand? She nodded, breathless but resolute. Yes. While Cassie rebuilt herself in a dusty studio, the Montgomery empire reeled. In a glass-walled penthouse high above Central Park, Preston Montgomery Jr. convened an emergency meeting with his inner circle. His son sat sullen in the corner, a shadow of the smug prince he had been days earlier. On the mahogany conference table lay newspapers, each headline more damning than the last. Tango of the Tyrant. Waitress outshines heir in viral showdown. Montgomery legacy in question after Gala disaster. Investors were fleeing. The stock continued its downward slide. Preston Jr.'s voice was low and lethal. This is more than a scandal. It's metastasized. This. Cassandra Riley has become the symbol of everything people hate about us. She is dangerous. One of the board members, a gray-haired man with nervous eyes, spoke up. She's just a dancer, sir. Surely the story will fade. No, Preston Jr. snapped, his hand slamming onto the table. It won't. She's not just a dancer. She's a narrative. A waitress who defied us. A victim of our business practices. Every time her name is mentioned, ours is dragged through the mud. And now Bishop has cast her in his new show. The room stiffened. Gregory Bishop was a cultural juggernaut. His productions weren't just plays, they were events. His name alone drew crowds, critics, politicians. If Cassandra Riley took the stage under his direction, the Montgomerys wouldn't just be mocked for one night in a ballroom. They would be immortalized as villains on Broadway. Preston Jr.'s gaze cut across the room and landed on his son. This is your mess. And you will fix it. Preston III bristled. She humiliated me. She humiliated all of us, his father snapped. This isn't about your ego anymore. It's about survival. Do you understand? For the first time in his life, Preston III felt something foreign, fear. His entire existence had been cushioned by wealth, insulated from consequences. But now, the empire trembled, and the fall would crush him first. That evening, Cassie returned home to find her phone buzzing with notifications. Nate Crow's follow-up article had gone live. The headline was brutal in its simplicity. The dancer's debt, Cassandra Riley on the true cost of the Montgomery empire. Nate had given her the space to tell her full story, the small family business crushed, the heart attack that had nearly killed her father, the years of servitude to survive. He wrote with care, weaving her tragedy with her triumph, connecting Preston III's cruelty at the Gala to the larger pattern of exploitation by Montgomery Corp. The article went viral instantly. Hashtags exploded across social media. Hashtag Dance Against Power. Hashtag Montgomery Exposed. Hashtag Justice for Cassie. Politicians shared it. Regulators announced inquiries into Montgomery Corp's contracts. Ordinary people who had lost homes, businesses, or dreams to corporate greed found a rallying cry in her name. Cassandra Riley was no longer just a dancer. She was a symbol. But symbols were dangerous. Late that night, Cassie stood by her small kitchen window, staring out at the neon blur of Queens. Her phone buzzed with another donation notification from the GoFundMe page, now over $100,000. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt the weight of inevitability. She had spoken her truth. And the Montgomerys would not let it go unanswered. Across the city, Preston III poured himself another drink in his luxury apartment, the ice clinking against crystal. His reflection in the glass window looked hollow, haunted. His fiancée was gone. His friends avoided his calls. His father's contempt burned like acid. All because of her. He slammed the glass down, shards scattering across the marble counter. His chest heaved with rage. She thinks she won, he muttered to himself. But this isn't over. For Cassandra Riley, the Gala had been a stage. For the Montgomerys, it had been a declaration of war. And wars in New York were never fought fairly. The following Monday, before the sun had fully risen over Manhattan, Cassie stood at the doors of Bishop's studio once again. This time, she wasn't just a guest, she was his chosen lead. A shiver ran through her as she pushed open the heavy doors and stepped inside. The studio was alive now, buzzing with dancers stretching, warming up, and murmuring in clusters. Some were seasoned veterans of Bishop's shows, others fresh-faced hopefuls. All turned to look when she entered. Whispers rippled through the room. That's her. The Gala dancer. The one who humiliated Montgomery. Bishop gave her the lead. Cassie's skin prickled with the weight of their stares. She wasn't just another dancer fighting for a spot, she was the outsider, the waitress plucked from obscurity, thrust into the spotlight. Resentment clung to the air like static. Bishop silenced the murmurs with a single clap. Enough. You've all read the news, so let me make this clear, Miss Riley is not here because of a viral headline. She is here because she has the fire I've been searching for. If any of you think you can outdance her, prove it on the floor. The challenge hung in the air. Cassie straightened, fighting the urge to shrink. She had earned this role in Bishop's eyes, but the others would not make it easy. The day's rehearsal began brutally. Hours of technique drills, endless repetitions of choreography, Bishop's barked commands cutting through the pounding of music. Cassie's body rebelled with every movement. Muscles long neglected screamed. Old injuries whispered warnings. By midday, she collapsed onto the floor, her breath ragged. But as she sat there, dripping with sweat, she felt something she hadn't in years: purpose. Pain no longer meant servitude. It meant progress. During a break, she caught Bishop watching her with his hawk-like eyes. "You're breaking yourself," he said quietly. She swallowed hard. "I have to. I can't let them be right, that I don't belong here." His gaze softened for a fraction of a second. "Then don't prove them wrong with exhaustion. Prove them wrong with excellence." Cassie nodded, determination settling deeper in her bones. But while she clawed her way back toward greatness, the Montgomerys sharpened their claws. In a skyscraper office suite, Preston Jr. sat with his legal team. "We need leverage," he said flatly. Dig into her past. Find debts, scandals, anything we can use to discredit her. One lawyer shifted uncomfortably. She's clean, sir. Aside from her father's bankruptcy, which already paints us in a poor light, there's nothing to exploit. No arrests, no scandals, no unpaid loans. Then make one, Preston Jr. snapped. His icy blue eyes flicked to his son. You started this. You'll finish it. I want Cassandra Riley destroyed before Bishop's show opens. Do you understand me? Preston III clenched his jaw. I understand. That night, as Cassie returned to her queen's apartment, she found a slip of paper tucked into her doorframe. No envelope. No signature. Just words scrawled in black ink. Stop dancing. Or you'll regret it. Her blood ran cold. She scanned the hallway, but it was empty, only the hum of flickering lights and the distant thrum of traffic outside. She clutched the note to her chest, her heart hammering. For years, humiliation had been her enemy. Now, it was something darker, threats, sabotage, the kind of intimidation only money could buy. Yet instead of retreating, Cassie felt the fire within her blaze brighter. She unfolded the note one more time, read the words, and whispered into the silence. I've regretted enough. Not this time. The war had officially begun. And while Preston Montgomery plotted her ruin, Cassie would discover that the stage she had reclaimed wasn't just for art, it was for battle. Rehearsals became Cassie's world. Dawn to dusk, the studio consumed her. Every day was a war between body and mind, her muscles screamed, her lungs burned, and her legs buckled, but she refused to fall. The mirror reflected not just sweat and exhaustion, but transformation. The waitress in sensible shoes was vanishing. The dancer she once was, the dancer she was meant to be, was rising again. Yet the whispers never stopped. During breaks, she caught fragments from other dancers. She's a publicity stunt. Bishop only cast her for the headlines. She'll never last the run. Cassie swallowed the bitterness like glass. She knew their resentment was born of fear, but it still cut deep. Every movement she made in rehearsal felt like proof on trial. She wasn't just dancing for Bishop anymore, she was dancing for survival. Nate Crow became a constant presence. At first, he had been just the photographer who captured her humiliation and triumph. Now, he was documenting her rise. He lurked quietly at rehearsals with Bishop's permission, snapping candid shots of her leaps, her stumbles, her unyielding determination. One evening, after rehearsal, Nate caught up with her outside the studio. You know you're not just dancing anymore, he said, falling into step beside her as they walked down 9th Avenue. She frowned. What do you mean? He tapped his camera bag. These pictures? They're not just about art. They're about resistance. Every step you take is a strike against the Montgomerys. People see you as more than a dancer. They see you as a fighter. Cassie stopped, the city's neon lights flickering across her face. I never asked for that, she said softly. No, Nate agreed. But sometimes the story chooses you. His words lingered with her long after he left. She hadn't asked to become a symbol. But maybe she needed to embrace it. The Montgomerys, meanwhile, were not idle. Preston III paced his penthouse like a caged predator, his hatred festering. Every headline about Cassie was another dagger. Every viral clip, every trending hashtag was proof of his failure. His father's disdain was unbearable. He needed to act, to reclaim control. And so he did. The first strike came quietly. Cassie arrived at rehearsal one morning to find Bishop pacing furiously with a letter in his hand. His assistant Monica hovered nearby, pale with shock. Cassie, Bishop said, his voice sharp, did you know about this? He thrust the letter toward her. It bore the letterhead of the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs. She scanned it, her stomach dropping. It was an official notice questioning the legitimacy of her casting. It cited concerns about fairness and improper influence due to viral publicity. The letter demanded an inquiry into Bishop's hiring practices and threatened to review his funding and permits. Cassie's knees weakened. This isn't real. I didn't do anything wrong. Of course it's not real, Bishop snapped, though his anger wasn't directed at her. It's a stunt. Someone with money pulled strings to make trouble. He tore the letter in half and tossed it aside. They won't win. But make no mistake, Cassandra, they've declared war. Cassie's throat tightened. She didn't need to ask who they were. She already knew. That night, she returned home to find her apartment door ajar. Panic gripped her chest. She pushed it open slowly, heart pounding. The place was ransacked. Drawers overturned, clothes scattered, a picture of her family shattered on the floor. Nothing was stolen, at least, not visibly. This wasn't a robbery. It was a message. On her kitchen table sat another note, written in the same sharp black ink as before. Quit now. Last warning. Her hands shook as she held the paper. For a moment, fear nearly broke her. She thought of her mother asleep in the next room, vulnerable to anyone with enough malice. She thought of the Montgomerys' reach, their money, their lawyers, their influence. She was one woman against an empire. But then she remembered the ovation in the ballroom. The sound of strangers rising to their feet for her. The words she had spoken to Preston, "My art is not for sale." She burned the note in her sink, watching the paper curl and blacken. The Montgomerys wanted her silenced. Instead, she would be louder. The next morning, she arrived at rehearsal early, barefoot and determined. When Bishop asked if she was ready, she met his gaze squarely. "I'm not just ready," she said. "I'm done being afraid." He studied her, then nodded. "Good. Because what's coming next will demand more than fearlessness. It will demand everything you've got." As Cassie leapt across the floor, fire in her veins, the storm gathered outside. The Montgomerys weren't finished. They had only begun. And soon, Cassie would learn just how far they were willing to go to crush her. The weeks that followed were a blur of sweat and music. Cassie lived inside the rehearsal studio, her body reshaped by endless drills, her soul sharpened by the weight of expectation. Bishop's production, Echoes, grew around her like a living thing. Every dancer, every note of music, every flicker of light was crafted to support the story Bishop wanted to tell, a woman haunted by her past, fighting to reclaim her voice. It was more than a role. It was her truth. But outside the studio, the world grew harsher. Nate's photographs of her rehearsals began appearing online, Cassie mid-leap, Cassie arched in anguish, Cassie staring fiercely into the mirror. The public loved it. They called her the comeback queen, the gala dancer, Broadway's new fire. Tickets for Echoes sold out before opening night. And the Montgomerys hated every second of it. Preston Jr. convened another meeting in the glass tower overlooking Central Park. "She's not just surviving," he growled. "She's thriving. Our attempts to discredit her only make her stronger. The public loves an underdog, and we've made her one." Preston III sat across from him, his jaw tight. He had lost everything, his fiancée, his friends, even his place in society's inner circle. Every time he saw Cassie's name in the news, humiliation stabbed like a knife. "Then we stop playing defense," he muttered. "We take her down in public." His father's cold eyes narrowed. "Explain." "She has a showcase before the critics next week, right? Preview performances before the official opening. That's our moment. If she fails there, if she stumbles in front of New York's sharpest critics, her entire story collapses. We just need to give her a little push." For the first time in weeks, Preston Jr.'s lips curved into a smile. The night of the first preview, the theater buzzed with anticipation. Rows of critics, industry veterans, and influencers filled the velvet seats. They weren't here just to see a new Bishop show, they were here to see her. Cassandra Riley, the waitress who had defied an empire. Backstage, Cassie's nerves twisted her stomach into knots. She paced in her costume, her black socks replaced by soft dance shoes. Every breath felt shallow. Bishop appeared at her side, his silver hair wild, his eyes intense. "Fear means you care," he said simply. "But remember, fear has no place on stage. Leave it in the wings." She nodded, though her hands trembled. The curtain rose. The music began. Her opening solo was a delicate balance of vulnerability and defiance, a dance that mirrored her own life. As she moved, the audience leaned in, captivated. Every step, every turn was precise, fueled by the fire of years lost and reclaimed. She was more than a dancer, she was a story told in flesh and bone. And then it happened. In the middle of a daring lift with her partner, her foot slipped on the polished floor. She felt her ankle twist, her body teetering on the edge of collapse. Gasps rippled through the audience. In that instant, humiliation loomed like a shadow. But Cassie refused to fall. Drawing on instinct, she transformed the stumble into choreography, rolling into a fluid floor sequence that looked intentional, even brilliant. Her partner followed her lead seamlessly. By the time she rose again, the audience erupted in applause, convinced they had witnessed genius improvisation. Backstage, however, the truth was clear. Cassie's ankle throbbed with pain, and Bishop's sharp eyes saw everything. "That wasn't clumsiness," he said grimly. He picked up a small object from the stage, nearly invisible, a scattering of tiny ball bearings. Someone had tried to sabotage her. Cassie's blood went cold. The Montgomerys. It had to be. But she didn't let the fear take root. Instead, she let the anger burn hotter. They wanted her to fall. She had risen instead. When the curtain fell at the end of the performance, the critics leapt to their feet. The applause was deafening. Reviews would later call her a revelation, the embodiment of fire and grace, a star reborn. Back in the shadows of the theater, Nate snapped one final picture, Cassie taking her bow, sweat glistening, eyes fierce, the crowd roaring. He knew it wasn't just a performance. It was survival. And though Cassie smiled through the ovation, she knew the Montgomerys had drawn blood. If they could sabotage her once, they could do it again. But she also knew something else. No matter what they threw at her, she wouldn't stop. Because now the fight wasn't just about her dreams. It was about truth, dignity, and showing the world that no amount of money could silence her. The Montgomerys had made their move. And Cassie was ready to make hers. The morning after the preview, the reviews hit the newsstands like thunderclaps. Cassandra Riley, a star is reborn. From Waitress to Broadway's fiery phoenix. Echoes is Bishop's masterpiece, and Riley its blazing core. Cassie sat at her kitchen table with a steaming mug of coffee, her ankle wrapped tightly in ice, her hands trembling as she scrolled through the articles on her cracked phone. Every critic sang her praises. Even the harshest voices in New York theater had been silenced by her performance. She should have felt elation. Instead, she felt a strange heaviness. Praise was intoxicating, but it also brought pressure, pressure to be perfect, pressure to carry not just a show but a story larger than herself. The Montgomerys hadn't destroyed her with sabotage. If anything, they had made her stronger. But she knew they wouldn't stop there. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nate. "Meet me at the diner on 34th, bring nothing but your courage." When she arrived, Nate already had his laptop open, his eyes gleaming with the hunger of a journalist who smelled blood. He turned the screen toward her. On it were documents, contracts, emails, scanned legal filings. I've been digging, Nate said quietly. Your father wasn't the only one Montgomery Corp destroyed with that waterfront project. I've found at least 5 other small suppliers who were crushed by the same loophole. All bankrupted. Families ruined. Cassie's stomach clenched. 5? Probably more, Nate said grimly. They've been doing this for years. Your family was just one of many. You're not an isolated tragedy, you're part of a pattern. She stared at the screen, fury igniting in her chest. For years, she had carried her father's ruin like a personal failure. But now she saw the truth, it was deliberate. Calculated. A system of cruelty dressed as business. What do you want to do with this? She whispered. Nate leaned in, his voice low. We tell it. All of it. Not just your dance, not just your story, every story. We use your platform to expose them. Cassie hesitated. She thought of her mother, frail and sick. She thought of the threats, the ransacked apartment, the ball bearings on the stage. Going public again would paint an even bigger target on her back. But then she thought of her father's hands, calloused, cracked, broken from years of building a business the Montgomerys had crushed without a thought. She thought of every small business owner who had been silenced, every family who had been erased by a contract loophole. Her eyes hardened. We do it. That night, during a rehearsal break, Bishop found her seated on the floor, scrolling through Nate's drafts on his laptop. He studied her for a moment before speaking. You're not satisfied with being a dancer anymore, are you? Cassie met his gaze. They tried to silence me in a ballroom. They tried to erase my father in a boardroom. And they've done it to others. If I have this stage, I'm going to use it. Bishop's eyes softened with something between pride and concern. You realize what this means. The Montgomerys don't fight fair. They will come after you harder than ever. I know, she said quietly. But I'm not afraid anymore. For the first time, Bishop smiled, not his usual sharp smirk, but something warmer, rarer. Then dance like your art is truth. Because it is. When Nate's new exposé hit the internet 2 days later, it detonated like a bomb. The Dancer's Debt, Part 2, Montgomery Corp's Trail of Ruin. It was meticulous, damning, undeniable. Nate had woven Cassie's story with those of 5 other families, showing a chilling pattern of exploitation. He included contracts, testimonies, and financial records. And he didn't stop there, he tied the corporation's greed directly to Preston Montgomery Jr., naming him as the architect of the scheme. Social media erupted. #Montgomery Exposed trended worldwide. Protesters gathered outside Montgomery Corp's gleaming headquarters with signs reading, "Art is priceless," and "No more loopholes." Politicians called for hearings. Regulators announced formal investigations. And at the center of it all was Cassandra Riley. She hadn't just survived humiliation. She had turned it into a weapon. In the Montgomery penthouse, Preston Jr. hurled a crystal glass against the wall, the shards scattering across the marble floor. She's making us the villains of a Broadway play, he snarled. She already made me a joke. Preston III shot back, his face twisted with bitterness. Now she's destroying the family too. This isn't about embarrassment anymore, Preston Jr. said, his voice low and venomous. It's about survival. If this investigation sticks, we lose everything. Do you understand me? Everything. What do we do? Preston III asked. His father's eyes glinted like steel. We remind Miss Riley that fairy tales don't last forever. If she wants war, she'll get one. That evening, as Cassie left the studio, she felt the hair rise on the back of her neck. A sleek black car idled at the curb. The tinted window rolled down just enough to reveal Preston III's face, pale and drawn but burning with malice. You should have taken the money, he called softly. Because now, Cassandra, you'll pay far more than $10,000. The window rolled up, and the car glided away into the night. Cassie's chest tightened, but she stood tall, staring into the darkness long after the car was gone. She wasn't just a dancer anymore. She was a target. And she was ready. The weeks leading up to Echo's official opening blurred into a whirlwind of rehearsals, press appearances, and endless interviews. Cassie became the face not only of Bishop's production but of a cultural moment. Magazine covers splashed her image across glossy spreads, her arched body mid-leap, her defiant stare beneath stage lights, her name whispered as Broadway's next great star. But behind the shimmer of success lurked shadows. The Montgomerys had gone silent publicly, retreating from the headlines after Nate's second exposé. Yet Cassie knew silence didn't mean surrender. It meant plotting. Waiting. Her fears proved right one evening when she returned home after rehearsal. The door to her apartment wasn't just ajar this time, it was wide open. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she rushed inside. Her mother's voice called faintly from the bedroom. "Cassie?" Cassie ran to her, relief flooding her body as she found her mother unharmed, though pale and shaken. On the bed lay a single envelope, thick and cream-colored, embossed with the Montgomery family crest. Cassie's stomach dropped as she tore it open. Inside was a single photograph. Her mother, snapped candidly in the grocery store earlier that week. On the back, scrawled in familiar black ink, were 4 words. "Next time, no warning." Cassie's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the photo. Her mother reached for her arm, confused. "What is it, sweetheart?" Cassie forced a smile, shoving the photo into her bag. "Nothing, Mom. Just junk mail." But inside, terror coiled like a snake. The Montgomerys weren't just threatening her career anymore, they were threatening her family. The next day, Cassie stormed into Bishop's studio, shoving the photograph into his hand. His face hardened as he studied it. "They've escalated," he muttered. "Cowards." "I can't let them hurt her," Cassie said, her voice cracking. "I can't." Bishop cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Listen to me. That's exactly what they want. Fear paralyzes. But you're on the edge of opening night. This show, your performance, it's bigger than them now. If you let them scare you off, they win. If you dance, if you stand tall, you'll destroy them in the only way that matters, in front of the whole world." Cassie swallowed hard, tears burning in her eyes. "But what if they?" "We'll protect her," Bishop said firmly. "I'll arrange security for your mother. They can't touch her. Not anymore." The assurance steadied Cassie's trembling heart, but the fire of rage burned hotter than her fear. The Montgomerys wanted her broken, silenced. Instead, she would answer them with something they couldn't crush: her art, her truth, her courage. Meanwhile, in the Montgomery penthouse, Preston III seethed as he poured himself another drink. "Why haven't we finished her yet?" he demanded of his father. "We scare her, we sabotage her, and still she rises. Do we need to burn the whole theater down?" Preston Jr. fixed him with a glare so icy it froze him mid-sentence. "Don't be a fool. This isn't about scaring her anymore, it's about crushing her spirit. She thrives on defiance. So we make the world doubt her. We take away the thing she values most, her dignity." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents forged to look legitimate, claims that Cassie had fabricated her past, exaggerated her story, even stolen choreography from Donovan Academy. "We leak this before opening night. If the public thinks she's a liar, she's finished." Preston III's lips curled into a cruel smile. "And I'll be there to watch her fall." The night before Echo's premiere, Nate found Cassie sitting alone on the stage after rehearsal, her legs dangling over the edge, the empty theater stretching into darkness around her. "They're going to hit you again," he said softly, sitting beside her. I've heard rumors, leaks about your past, accusations. They're desperate. Cassie stared at the rows of vacant seats, her voice quiet but steady. They've taken everything from me before. My father's business. My dreams. They won't take this. Not now. Nate studied her face, lit only by the dim glow of stage lights. You know you're not alone in this, right? You've got me. You've got Bishop. You've got an entire audience waiting to believe in you. She turned to him, tears shining in her eyes. Then I'll give them everything I have. Opening night arrived like a storm. The theater was packed, critics, celebrities, ordinary fans who had followed her story from the gala. The air buzzed with anticipation. Cameras flashed as Cassie stepped into the wings, her costume hugging her frame, her heart pounding. Backstage, Bishop placed a hand on her shoulder. Remember, dance like the truth is on fire inside you. She nodded, inhaling deeply. The curtain rose. As the music swelled, Cassie stepped into the spotlight. For a heartbeat, the world fell silent. She wasn't a waitress, she wasn't a victim, she wasn't even just a dancer. She was Cassandra Riley, and this was her reckoning. Every step, every turn, every breath carried the weight of her journey. The audience leaned forward, spellbound. When she reached the climactic solo, her body twisting, arching, leaping with raw emotion, it was as if time itself stopped. By the final note, the theater erupted in thunderous applause, louder even than the ovation at the gala. Critics stood. Strangers wept. Cassie bowed, tears streaking her face, the spotlight blazing above her like vindication. But as the applause roared, Nate burst backstage, his face pale. He held up his phone, the screen glowing with fresh headlines. Broadway star exposed. Documents reveal Cassandra Riley lied about her past. The Montgomerys had struck. And this time, they hadn't aimed at her body. They had aimed at her name. The roar of applause still thundered in Cassie's ears when Nate's words sank in. Exposed. Lied. Fraud. The headlines flashed on his phone screen like blades. Her knees nearly buckled, but she forced herself to stand tall. The audience was still chanting her name. To crumble now would hand the Montgomerys their victory. She took one last bow, holding her tears at bay, and retreated into the wings. Backstage was chaos, stagehands congratulating her, dancers buzzing with adrenaline, Bishop himself standing stone-faced as Nate shoved the phone into his hands. Forged, Bishop muttered after a glance. His sharp eyes narrowed. The timing, the precision, this is the Montgomerys. Of course it is, Cassie said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. They couldn't stop me on the stage, so they're trying to break me off it. But Nate wasn't panicked. His jaw was set, his eyes fierce. They've overplayed their hand. These documents? I've already started verifying them. They're sloppy fakes. Whoever put this together doesn't understand that the internet is better at investigating than any corporation. We can prove this is a smear. And when we do, it'll backfire. Cassie clutched his arm, hope sparking in her chest. How long? Hours. Maybe less. I've already reached out to Donovan Academy. I know alumni on the board. They'll confirm your record by morning. Bishop's sharp voice cut through. Then we do not cower. Cassandra, you must face this storm head-on. Hide, and they will write the ending for you. Stand tall, and the truth will carry you. The next morning, Cassie woke to a hurricane. News outlets buzzed with accusations. Talk shows debated her integrity. Social media split into camps, some defending her fiercely, others parroting the Montgomerys' smear. For a brief, terrifying moment, she feared it would all crumble. And then the tide turned. Donovan Academy released a statement. Cassandra Riley was a top student at our institution, recipient of multiple awards, and withdrew only due to personal hardship. Any claims to the contrary are false. Other families Nate had interviewed came forward publicly, speaking on camera about how Montgomery Corp had ruined them. Documents disproving the forgery spread online faster than the lies. By noon, hashtags flipped. Hashtag Justice for Cassie trended. Hashtag Montgomery fraud surged even higher. The smear campaign meant to destroy her had instead become the nail in the Montgomery's coffin. That afternoon, Cassie stood before a bank of microphones at a press conference Bishop had arranged. The theater lobby was packed with journalists, fans, and cameras. Nate stood at her side, Bishop just behind. She gripped the podium with trembling hands, but when she spoke, her voice was clear, cutting through the chaos. They tried to silence me, she began. First with humiliation. Then with threats. Then with lies. But here I stand, not because I'm fearless, but because the truth is stronger than fear. She paused, her gaze steady as the cameras flashed. I was a waitress. I was invisible. I was a daughter watching her father's dream crushed by Montgomery Corporation. But last night, I was a dancer again. And today, I am a voice for every family they've erased. The room fell silent, hanging on every word. My art is not for sale, she continued. My dignity is not for sale. And no amount of money, no empire, no dynasty can take that away. The applause that followed was deafening. Reporters shouted questions, cameras zoomed in, but Cassie stepped back from the podium with her head held high. The war wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who had been silenced. In the Montgomery penthouse, Preston Jr. watched the broadcast with icy fury. His empire was crumbling in real time. Investigators were circling. Investors were fleeing. His son sat slumped on the sofa, pale and broken. This is your doing, Preston Jr. hissed. One woman. One dancer. And you gave her the weapon to destroy us. Preston III didn't reply. He knew it was true. His arrogance, his dare, his cruelty had set everything in motion. And now, everything they had built was ash. Opening night of Echoes arrived days later, and the theater was electric. Outside, protesters lined the sidewalks, their signs reading, Dance Against Greed, and, Cassie Stands, We Stand. Inside, every seat was filled, celebrities and critics alike waiting for her to step onto the stage. When the curtain rose and the spotlight fell on her, Cassie felt a surge of calm. She wasn't just performing anymore. She was reclaiming everything the Montgomerys had tried to steal, her art, her voice, her dignity. The performance soared. Every leap, every twist, every breath carried not just choreography but conviction. By the finale, when she stood center stage with her arms outstretched, the audience rose in a wave of thunderous applause. Tears streamed down her face as she bowed. She wasn't just a dancer. She was a survivor. She was a fighter. She was Cassandra Riley. That night, as she left the theater, Nate walked beside her, his camera slung over his shoulder. Bishop followed, his face softened by something close to pride. You changed the story, Nate said quietly. You didn't just survive, you won. Cassie looked up at the New York sky, the city lights blazing above her. No, she said softly. We all did. Every person they silenced. Every family they crushed. This wasn't just my fight. It was theirs too. And as she walked into the night, the echoes of her triumph following her, she knew the truth. The Montgomerys had tried to buy her silence. Instead, they had given her a stage. And on that stage, she had stolen not just the spotlight, she had stolen back her life. Cassandra Riley's story is proof that the greatest power doesn't lie in money, but in courage. What began as a cruel dare meant to humiliate her became the fire that reignited her dreams and exposed a dynasty's corruption. In the end, Preston Montgomery learned the most expensive lesson of all: you cannot buy dignity. If her story moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that truth, resilience, and integrity will always outshine arrogance. And don't forget to subscribe to True Echo for more stories that matter. Tell us in the comments, what part of Cassie's journey resonated most with you?